All right. I think we're going to jump in. So, welcome everyone. Glad to have you here. If you just got here, we had put in the chat for folks to share a non-work related spark. So feel free to chime in on that if you'd like. But let me get to my agenda. All right. Well, so first of all, thank you all. Thank you not only for your time this morning, but thank you for the amazing work that you're doing. I was just thinking this morning, that the only reason SparkYouth exists is really to support your work. So we are honored to be in community with you. We're going to do quick introductions just of the SparkYouth team, so you know who we are. So I'm Susie Myers-Jackson. I'm the executive director of SparkYouth. I use she, her pronouns. My non-work related spark, which I had put in the chat earlier, is gardening. And I also just wanted to share in terms of some context for me in this role. I was originally a grantee of SparkYouth. So I used to work at a youth development organization called Opening Act, which was a theater-based youth development organization. I was there for 17 years. And when we were first invested in by SparkYouth, our budget was $150,000. I think at the time we were the smallest organization they had taken on. And my time as a grantee with SparkYouth really was transformative for the organization. We eventually grew to be an over $2 million organization. We went from serving 3 to 57 high schools in New York City. So I come to this role, I think, with very personal experience on sort of the receiving end or the partnering end with SparkYouth. After I graduated from SparkYouth as a grantee, I was invited to join the board of SparkYouth, where I was for 5 years. And then I've been in this role of executive director for 2 years. So that's a little introduction to myself, and I want to hand it over to Kelly, my colleague.
Hi, I'm Kelly Cunningham. I use she, her pronouns. I've been with SparkYouth for 10 years. I'm the deputy director. What were the other thing? Oh, my spark right now actually is food prepping. I'm meal prepping. It has changed my last few weeks in terms of when I come home from work. I've been just pulling stuff out of the freezer, which is very nice. Susie, was there anything else? I'm trying to think of anything else I missed. I think that's it.
Yeah.
Looking forward to meeting all of you.
And rounding out our small but mighty 3-person team at SparkYouth, Rachel, who I think many of you have communicated with.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rachel Abick. My pronouns are she, her. Susie's right. I've emailed with many of you, and it's been nice to sort of get to know you and get to know your organizations a little bit. I'm the Associate Director of Operations and Development at SparkYouth. I've been here for about 1.5 years now. So this is my first time going through the grantee selection process, and I'm really excited. I was very excited this morning to get to meet all of you. My non-work spark, if you didn't see it in the chat, because it's Super Bowl week, my non-work spark is the Kansas City Chiefs. Let's go.
Thank you, Rachel. All right, so we are going to, just so you know, we're going to mute everyone else for the time being. We're going to go through some information, and then we will definitely have time for questions at the end.
Yeah.
So Kelly, if you can go to the agenda. This is the first time we're doing this kind of info session, and I think a big sort of motivation behind that is that I have been on the grant seeking end for most of my career, and I think we really hope that today can just make things easier for you. We want to be as honest and transparent as possible about the process, sort of what we're looking for. We want to save you time. So that's really our why behind today. What we're going to do is I'm going to go through a little bit of information about SparkYouth's mission and vision, just who we are. We're going to talk about what a partnership with SparkYouth looks like. We're going to go through some of the details about the actual process, the grantee selection process, and then we'll have time for Q&A. Also wanted to lift up that we are recording this, and we will make the recording of this available on our FAQ page after today. So if you have to pop out or if you want to share this with someone else on your team, you'll be able to do that. All right. So actually the first thing we're going to do is share this brief video about SparkYouth because I think it does a probably more compelling job of explaining who we are and what we do than just me talking. Rachel, I'm not sure we can hear it. Can folks hear it? No.
Kelly's playing it.
I think you need to unmute yourself, maybe? I'm not sure. Sorry, bear with us all.
A spark can be a person,
Can we roll it back, Kelly?
place.
Thank you.
One person spark. A spark is something that lights you up, that moves you forward, that helps you express who you are and what you want to offer the world. A spark can be a person, a passion, a place. One person's spark can be very different from another's. But research shows us that when a young person has a spark and the support to develop that spark, they have significantly better developmental and academic outcomes. We know that sparks promote well-being and resilience, and that sparks help young people move from a place of surviving to thriving. SparkYouth identifies organizations with visionary leaders and transformative youth development programs. Our cohort of 15 organizations all use different sparks to engage, inspire, and empower young people throughout New York City. We invest in these organizations at a critical moment in their trajectory of growth. Our model provides significant financial support, intensive capacity building and professional development, and a powerful peer network. It's this unique combination that leads to our impact. 95% of our organizations double in size and 45% triple in size during their time with SparkYouth.
SparkYouth is unique in that they don't only just give us the funding, they also provide technical assistance. Especially for me as a fairly new executive director, I needed help with my budget. I needed help with building culture and hiring. And it's like, no matter what I needed, you all were there for me to help me through that process.
Being an executive director can be lonely. It can be, there's a lot of self-doubt, and having the staff at SparkYouth so supportive and so available, a lot of my impulses have been reconfirmed, and that has created a lot of confidence in me as a leader.
The thoughtfulness behind the way of giving, it is beyond monetary. It is, I would say, an endorsement. It is a sign off that this is an organization that has a lot of promise and that people should pay very close attention to.
SparkYouth is changing the traditional model of philanthropy and giving far beyond a check. We meet organizations where they are, with trust, with listening, and with a deep commitment to their long-term success.
When Excel was first invested by SparkYouth, we were a $900,000 organization. We are currently an $8 million organization with a strategic plan to grow to serve many more young people in New York City. If it wasn't for SparkYouth, we probably would not be here today.
What we're doing at SparkYouth goes beyond one young person, beyond one organization, beyond one neighborhood. We're igniting opportunity all across the city and positively impacting the youth development community as a whole.
Within the next 5 years, I also see SparkYouth as a deep contributor in solving some of the most complex issues that our society is facing, giving people the opportunity to innovate, to be bold, creating opportunities that give our young people the freedom to do whatever it is that they wish to do.
5 years is in our minds as a community model that can be scaled to other communities. I would love to see our model in Queens or in the Bronx.
Since we were founded over 7 years ago, we have always had a wait list. I would love to be in a place where we no longer have a wait and we're able to serve all of the young people aging out of foster care that need our help. SparkYouth organizations, past and present, have collectively served 3 million young people in counting. Let's spark 3 million more.
All right, so that's a little bit about us. We want to talk now about what a partnership with SparkYouth looks like, what it means to be a grantee. This is our mission, you heard it, but we ignite growth in community-based programs with the goal of expanding opportunities for young people in our city. So what does it mean to be a SparkYouth grantee? You heard a little bit in the video, I think, from our executive directors of current grantees, what that partnership looks like. But I think starting with the things we believe in, number one is equity. So really supporting organizations that are actively working to level the playing field for New York City youth. We aim to center equity as a value in all areas of our organization. So for young people, nonprofit leaders, staff, board, and the larger SparkYouth community. Second thing we believe in is investing in growth. I think personally, as someone who ran a smaller nonprofit for many years, we certainly see and value the impact of small organizations. And I don't think that for an organization to be successful, every organization has to grow and scale. That said, SparkYouth as an organization is very specifically focused on organizations that are looking to grow. Now, growth can look very different. So it's not just number of young people you're working with or number of program sites. Growth can be deepening impact, not just broadening impact. We'll really look for you in the application when we get to that to identify what growth looks like for you. But SparkYouth is specifically looking to invest in organizations that are at some critical stage of their development, with the goal that they are building their capacity and eventually either reaching more young people or serving young people better. Support beyond funding. So we know that particularly at sort of this moment in time, what we consider second stage organizations, it takes money for sure for you to do your work and to grow, and it takes more than just money. So we are really partners beyond the check, and we'll talk in more detail about what that looks like. Meeting grantees where they are. We really lead with listening. And again, this comes from, I think, very personal experience being on the receiving end of capacity building from funders. We reject a one-size-fits-all approach to capacity building. We understand that organizations are in different places and have different needs. So we really aim with our capacity building to work in close partnership with our grantees, sort of co-create strategies for support and have you all as grantees define high priority areas. Trust. You are the experts in your work, and your young people are experts as well. So we really trust and respect our grantees as expert professionals. We let you determine how best to utilize funding. And part of that is also really trying to simplify and streamline paperwork as much as possible so that you all can focus on the real work. Building community. We have a cohort-based model that's really focused on leveraging the expertise of our different grantee organizations. We center relationships. We ask for and act on feedback, and really aim to engage all of our stakeholders as partners in the work. And we are always learning. The world is ever changing. We believe it's our responsibility to embrace opportunities to learn, to grow, to better meet the needs of our grantees and the young people that they work with. So those are some values. This is a quote from Jessica Santana. America on Techs has been a 2-time grantee, which we'll explain in Q&A, but you are allowed, if you are accepted as a grantee, it's a commitment of 3 years, but you can apply for a second round if you still meet the criteria. So we've worked with AOT for many years now. All right, so our model, which you heard a little bit in the video, but I really think of this as a trifecta of support. So number one is the money, multi-year commitments. It's a 3-year commitment, unrestricted funding, which we believe wholeheartedly in. Again, going back to trust and you all knowing where to invest dollars to have the biggest impact in your organizations. Professional development, capacity building, technical assistance, sort of whichever of those phrases rings true for you. We call all of that our cofactor lab, which we'll get into more details, but this is the sort of beyond the check support. And then the peer network. Right now, our cohort is 15 organizations. So we have a lot of opportunities for those 15 leaders to be coming together, learning from, growing with one another. So this leads to our impact, and we really believe that it's those 3 things together in our model that create this kind of impact, not just the money, not just the cofactor, not just the peer support, but all 3 together. So 95% of our grantees double in size during their time with us, 45% triple in size. And we're approaching our 30th anniversary this year, and we're happy to say that 95% of our grantees are still operating and thriving. We can go to the next slide. You heard Giselle in the video talk about this, but I think it's inspiring and exciting to look at where organizations are a little bit past SparkYouth. You know, we sort of think of this time with us as igniting folks to getting to the next stage, and then they often grow to be really big organizations like Exalts. All right, so we wanted to talk a little more specifically about what the cofactor lab looks like. So in chemistry, a cofactor is a compound necessary to incite a powerful reaction. So your work is probably the cofactor for your young people. We like to think of SparkYouth hopefully as the cofactor to your organizations. And we put all of that support under this umbrella of the cofactor lab. So what did that look like last year? We have defined really 4 buckets of organizational success. The one that we don't have on here is programs. Programs, people, practices, resources. We think those are 4 really key buckets to determining an organization's impact, long-term sustainability. We don't provide a lot of support in programs because, again, we trust you to be the experts. And we support organizations that really, even though they're all working in youth development, are working in a wide range of types of programming. So, you know, right now we have organizations that are working in juvenile justice, working in the foster care system, working in education. We're not going to come in and try and tell you how to do that. Where we do find that our support has been the most impactful is in these 3 areas. So under people, practices, and resources. And this past year, we provided a total of 634 hours of consulting and professional development to our 15 grantees. So what did that look like? So under people, these are just some examples of what the cofactor lab support could look like for your organization. And again, we don't require grantees to do any of this. We really work with organizations and say, what do you need? What is most helpful? Here's some things that we know we're uniquely good at. Take advantage of if it makes sense for your organization, and not if not. So some of our grantees this past year, we provided leadership coaches and executive director mentors. We paid for the training of the Management Center. If you don't know them, they're a wonderful organization. So a 2-day training for effective management. We've run workshops with board members to help them fundraise better. Under practices, we did a very robust 6-month strategic planning process with about 1/3 of our grantees. We provide a lot of resources just around policies, practices, protocols. We've talked about co-leadership models, and we actually just launched a 10-month program called The Future Is Now: Succession Planning for Sustainable Organizations. Under resources, we've provided various types and levels of fundraising training for our organizations. I will say that that's the one bucket that most of our organizations would like support in. And we also did this really incredible partnership with a nonprofit finance fund this past year, where they did training on strategic budgeting and scenario planning, cash flow planning, and really talking about a full cost model, how to plan for and raise money to the full cost of your work. This is from Dan, one of our grantees. And we can go to the next one. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the grantee selection process. Just so you know, I'll probably be talking for another 5 to 10 minutes max, and then we'll turn it over to you, but I want to get through some of this. So who we support: community-based New York City youth development organizations provide transformational programming for children ages 1 to 24. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but transformational meaning, you know, something that has sort of the duration and the impact to really be a game changer in a young person's life. Fiscal year 24 budgets between 150,000 and 1.5 million, and organizations between 2 and 10 years old. These 2 things are firm. It's tough, you know, at some point you just have to draw a line, but again, in the effort of saving you all time, we don't want you to go through the process of applying if you don't meet these requirements, because especially the budget and the age of the organization are really firm guidelines. Be located and operate within New York City and be poised for expansion. Let's talk about who we don't support, just to call out some questions that we often get. So if you're an organization that has youth programming just as a subset, let's say you're a cultural institution or you're a large arts organization and you have one subset of programming that is focused on youth, that's not an organization that we would support. We're really looking for organizations whose mission is youth. We often get a question that says, well, we're older than 10 years old, but we've just gone through sort of a strategic plan, or we have a new leader, or we're at this really critical moment of inflection. We absolutely recognize that as a really important moment, but at this time, we're not funding organizations in that scenario. So have to be founded between 2014, 2022. What I will say, if there's any wiggle room, it's sort of founding date versus 501c3 date. Sometimes there's like a gap between those, but those dates are firm. If you're more of a sort of access program, let's say like an arts access program, so you bring, I keep doing theater references because that's my background, you bring lots of young people to see one show a year, but aren't having any kind of long-term meaningful programming with them that's consistent, that's not the kind of work that we support. If you are a subsidiary or a branch of a national organization, we won't support you. The exception is if you are wholly independent and have your completely own operation. And most likely in that case, it does make sense just to connect with myself or Kelly just to confirm that you would qualify, because again, we don't want you to waste time filling out an application. We also don't fund religiously affiliated organizations. Organizations that just do a summer camp or a day camp. If that is one aspect of your programming, that's fine. And if you're a sports or arts or any kind of program that doesn't have an academic or social emotional learning component, we're really looking for organizations that are focused on youth development goals. So you don't have to have academic or social emotional, but you have to have one of those in combination with sort of whatever the spark is that you're providing to your young people. Great. So we're going to talk about our process. So we have a selection committee. So this is an interesting, I think for me, again, as a grant seeker for a long time, it's a little different. We're not a foundation with, say, 3 program officers who come out, review, and then present you to the board. We actually have a group of people. It'll be about 45 people this year in 8 teams. It's a diverse group of community, business, and nonprofit leaders, including former SparkYouth grantees. I actually served as a member of the selection committee for 2 cycles, not as a SparkYouth staff member, but as a former SparkYouth grantee. So those folks will get divided into teams. We do provide a lot of guidance for them. We ensure that each of those teams has a variety of areas of expertise represented. And if we go to the next slide, we'll talk about sort of what that looks like. So the timeline, the RFP responses are due on March 8th. By the end of April, our selection teams will have culled down to the organizations who they would like to visit in person, and organizations that have been selected for a site visit will be notified by then. Over the course of April and May, we'll have site visits. We will provide a how to host a great site visit resource. We'll probably do that as a pre-recorded Zoom or webinar that you can just view on your own time. A lot of the times our organizations are really small and maybe haven't had a lot of experience hosting foundations for site visits, and we want to set you up for success. So we'll give you sort of all the tips that we have on that. Then by the end of June, we'll notify organizations on the final decision. And then we run on a calendar year. So although organizations will be notified in the summer, sort of official term of grantee partnership will begin in January of 2025. And then it's a 3-year commitment. I think this might be my last slide, and then we'll go to questions. So our application, again, we really aim to streamline it as much as possible. It's also a big partnership. It's a big commitment. So we do really try through our questions to get to know you as an organization. When you look at it, I think there's sort of 3 pages of questions, brief pages. The first set is mission, history, and programs. My hope for all of you is that this is pretty much a copy and paste job. We tried to make those questions really standard. What's your mission? What's your history? What are your programs? So hopefully that's a copy and paste. The next 2 sections are, I think, a little bit not so standard, and I would say that aligns with us being a not so standard funder. So the second section is about strategy and growth. What I want to say about this is that, I mentioned earlier, SparkYouth is specifically interested in investing in organizations that are at a critical moment of growth. So even though you might feel like you're in a place, or what I always said was playing whack-a-mole, you're just trying to get the programs, you're just trying to keep going. We want to know that you can at least envision beyond that, that you can envision beyond the putting out fires and the whack-a-moles, because that's really our mission, is to help you get to that next phase. So even if you aren't exactly sure how you're going to get there, we are looking to support organizations and leaders that are able to at least see beyond that and think about what growth looks like for them, and what strategic questions you're struggling with. The last section, I think there's 2 questions on SparkYouth partnership. And one of them, I just want to add a little context. The first question, I think, asks, how you would use 3 years of unrestricted funding to address your challenges and or achieve your goals. I just want to make it really clear, the funding is unrestricted. So you don't have to say, there's no wrong answer to this, I think is the point. If you're like, we need development staff, we need infrastructure, we need to cover the overhead, great, fine. Be honest with us. This is not a trick question where you have to convince us that by getting 3 years of funding, you'll quadruple the number of kids you're working with. I would say, if anything, these questions are really just our opportunity to understand you as a leader, your vision for the organization, where things are hard. Again, as a grant seeker, I just know, and I really want to be really honest with you, there's no wrong answer here. We just want you to be able to articulate to us what this kind of investment, how it could move the needle for your organization. And the second question there about SparkYouth partnership, again, I think be really honest. We ask about, sort of on the capacity building side, what would help move the needle for your organization? Do you need support building your team? Do you need support building HR? Do you need fundraising help? Just be really, really honest with us. It helps us to know, who you are and how we might be able to support you. And these are just a couple of sort of hot tips on grant writing. If some of you, depending on where you are, maybe have a lot of experience with grant writing, some of you not so much. So my tips are, number 1, make sure you answer the question. Just, we asked the questions for the information we want to know. So really make sure that you've answered the question. I think with us specifically, keep in mind that because our process has this grantee selection committee, you will have folks from a wide variety of backgrounds reading your applications. So while, again, there will definitely be folks on every team who have experience in nonprofit, in youth development, not everyone will. So really encourage you to use language that someone who's not an expert, let's say, in the foster care system can still understand, if that's what your organization does. Don't sugarcoat your challenges. Again, not a trick question. This is not like, what's your weakness? And then you tell us, I'm a perfectionist, right? I feel like that's the classic college interview version. We really want to know. We really, really want to know. I think Rachel mentioned earlier, part of our excitement for today was we're all on our team. We're like, it feels like the first day of school, because we know that some subset of you who are on this call will be, this is our first, interaction in the beginning of a 3-year partnership. And the better we can understand your challenges, the better we can partner with you. Be succinct. You do not have to use the full word count. I will say that I did have Kelly make the word count a little more robust, mostly because I did not want you spending time cutting and being so worried about, your 10 words over. So even whatever word count we say, if we say 250, we've built into the form, I think, a 50-word buffer. So you don't have to waste your time stressing about cutting down, but also just really want to say, you don't have to use the full word count. Just if you've answered the question, that's good. And there are a couple questions on there that aren't required. Like in the program section, I think we give the option, if you haven't already addressed above, sort of how your work goes, impacts the social, emotional, or academic world of your young people, we give you more space to do that. But if you've already answered it in the questions above, you don't have to answer that other question. Okay, those are my tips. Just again, thank you. We just really want to thank you for everything you're doing. And again, as someone who has been in that place of, past startup, but as I always say, not yet getting funding from Robinhood. I know you're in it, you're in the thick of it, and we're really grateful. So we're going to go to Q&A, and I'm actually, before I have anyone sort of go off mute, I'm going to turn to Rachel because I know she's been looking at the chat. Rachel, could you just maybe call out for me any questions that have already come up, and we'll start there?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. We've got 2 so far great questions in the chat. The first one from Lara Daly. She asks, can you define what you mean by consistent, long-term, meaningful connection? How long?
That's a great question. Kelly, feel free to chime in. We don't have a strict parameter on that, right? So I know there are some organizations or funders that would say, oh, you have to have a minimum of 30 hours of contact with young people over the year or something like that. We don't have an exact number on that. Kelly, do you want to add in context?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've sometimes seen from applicants is we have, folks that are meeting with, they'll apply and they're meeting with students like once every 6 weeks or once every 3 months. And that, in our book, that's not enough contact to, have a meaningful impact on their lives, even though they might be doing something very significant, like helping immigrant students get into college. So we definitely are looking for orgs that have consistent, that might be once a week, it might be, 3 times a week, and do that over the course of a school year or multiple school years, depending on the organization. So there isn't, like Susie said, fast and hard rules around that, but we're looking for something that's consistent with the same young person over and over.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. And in terms of the long term, I was wondering if it was like there were years attached to it. So 1 year, 2 years, 3 years.
I mean,
No.
usually what we're looking for is a year or more with a young person. We obviously understand there's attrition, kids move schools, they relocate, things like that happen. But we're, usually looking for something above a semester, but we're not looking for 5. There are orgs in our wheelhouse that have 5 years of engagement. They follow their alums through college, but we're really looking at, a year or more in terms of a school year or more with young people.
One thing I would just add to that is we're also aware, and we'll let you tell us if your population of youth is particularly transient. Like, one of our current grantees is Drama Club. They provide theater programming at Rikers, in juvenile justice systems. There's obviously a lot of shifting of young people, or if you're working with, a population of young people who are currently homeless or in the foster care system. So we recognize that. And I think that's partly why there's not hard and fast. And I'm just going to encourage, because I think it'll be the quickest way. Anyone who has additional questions, let's just put them all in the chat. Then Rachel can draw my attention.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. All right, the next question then from Anna Reyes. Our organization is based in NYC and also has been serving youth outside the US. We're not a subsidiary. Should we be answering the organizational history and number of participants served questions for our work in New York City only, or can we include our work outside of the US? We're looking to make connections with youth in NYC to programs outside the US as part of our growth model.
Hi, Anna. I would say focus on the New York City work, but maybe when you're talking about your organization's history, there's a question for history. That's a moment that you can sort of lift up the connection between the work that's outside of New York City and New York City. But then beyond that, I would really focus on the New York City work, because that's where we're looking to really support young people.
Great. From John Garibaldi and Roxanne Tedisco, I'm so sorry if I'm butchering your names. I'm trying. From Emerging Leaders Program in the Bronx, they say you mentioned the autonomy of your grantees to implement as they see fit. That said, what does a successful partnership look like for you in terms of ongoing reporting or communication?
That's a great question. So I think on day one in this seat, I sat down with Kelly. I was like, "We're getting rid of reporting." So we don't do official reporting. What we do is an annual conversation. So either that might include, we'll come meet you and see your programs in action as well. For our grantees this year who are heading into their final year with us, we're just having a Zoom call with them. And that reporting, as it were, that conversation is usually 3 questions. What's going well? What's challenging? How can we best support you? One thing I think that's interesting to note, I realize we didn't put this on the slides, in terms of our model, is that we don't have an endowment. We raise the money every year. So we're actually in an interesting position where we're grant making, but we also have to fundraise every year. So one thing that means, and when we think of communication with our grantees, is we are out there advocating for you and your work. We are out there trying to raise as much money as possible to give to your organizations on an annual basis. So the better we understand what's happening at your organization, successes and challenges, the better we can communicate that to our donors and prospective donors. So I think understanding sort of where folks are really helps us in that way, and then also helps us to better support you. So that's the reporting thing. I will say, we have a really great tool that we've built that's sort of an organizational health assessment. It's a survey. It's built in Google Survey. We're very conscious of time. It takes 20 minutes for an executive director to complete. We ask organizations to fill that out once a year. They're all radio buttons. So, no open-ended questions. It's very quick. And really what we do is we have organizations fill that out in advance of us having the conversation with them. So then we can come and say, wow, it looks like knocking it out of the park on sort of all the program things. Ooh, looks like you're struggling with your board. How can we help you with your board? So we do that. And we do also, when we have those annual check-ins, we'll ask folks to give us just a couple of sort of numbers snapshots, so we understand where they are. Just things like, what's your budget from year 1 to year 2? How many young people are you working with? How many program sites? How many board members? How many staff members? That kind of thing. And it doesn't, we're clear that that doesn't influence, anything in terms of us funding you or supporting you once we're in partnership, like you're in. But it helps us again to tell the story and to also figure out how we can best support you. And then just one more thing I'll add. When we think about communication, I think it's just more, I'm thinking about the Cofactor Lab. And, I would say for most of our organizations, sort of their participation usually looks like maybe one deep dive is what we call them, say like the 6-month strategic planning process or the 10-month succession planning process. It's usually based on staff capacity. I would say what we typically hear from our organizations is like, I want to do it all, but they can't, and we really encourage them like, well, let's think about what's a priority this year versus next year, et cetera. So usually over the course of the year, I would say an org is involved in one kind of deeper dive, which means maybe once a month, we're having a workshop with them or a session with them. And then we also have roughly every 6 weeks leadership collectives. Those are pretty open-ended. It's an hour and a half, typically on Zoom, though we do have some in person because people like that. And it's really an opportunity for the leaders to come together and talk about whatever they need to talk about. It was a long answer, but communication and reporting sort of, go across different areas for us.
I'm sure a lot of people were thinking that same thing. So that's been covered now. Our next question from Laura Bergen, Press Pass NYC. She says we have a fellowship program for teachers, training the trainers in a way, as well as programming for students. Would that make us ineligible?
Kelly, chime in if you have a different answer. It's if not knowing all the details, Laura, and if we want to connect one-on-one after this, we can, because I feel like this might be a really individual question. But I would just say generally, if programming for youth is still the centerpiece of your work, your focus, your mission is on youth, and you just have this additional work that you're doing with teachers or grown-ups, et cetera, then yes, I think you're eligible. If the focus of if the mission of your organization is serving teachers and youth is sort of a sidebar, then I don't think it's a good fit. But we'll just put a pin in that, Laura, and we'll shoot you an email after this to see if you want to talk more specifically.
Great. Gina Jefferson from Just As I Am Youth. She says, you mentioned we should be honest about what we need. What if we're not totally clear which needs to focus on first?
That's a great question. It's funny, when we were looking over the questions and really trying to revise this at first, I'll just be honest, one of the questions said, what are your challenges and how do you plan to address them? And we went, well, I remember what it was like to be at this stage in an organization. I might have known my challenges, but I didn't know how to address them, right? That was part of the challenge. And so we just made that question, what are your challenges? I would say, Gina, you can say that, just say we have a bunch of needs. I'm not sure which to address first, but here they are. Or to articulate if that is something that you are excited to have sort of thought partnership on with SparkYouth, tell us that too. Yeah.
Great.
That's helpful. Thank you. Thank you.
Kelsey Barrera asks to dig in a little bit more on the location eligibility. She says, would an organization that is based in New York City and doing 50% or more of their work in New York City, but also serves youth in other states, be eligible?
Great question. Kelsey, I think we'll tag you also just to send a personal email to dig into the specifics of yours. But I would say broadly for folks, if more than half your work is in New York City, and again, like you're focused here, like we do have some organizations, let's say America on Tech, which Jessica was quoted earlier, they started in New York City. Like New York City was, the focus of their work. They have since expanded to other cities. We fund them. Kelly, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, we would have to look at what the breakdown is and yeah, that's going to be on a case basis. But the bulk, way more than 50% of your work has to be here in New York City, and we can look at what that looks like for you.
All right, from Samara Coles, this is probably a big question. I know I've gotten this in emails already. Can you talk more about the founded date versus the 501c3 date to be eligible?
Kelly, you take that one.
Yeah, I just think some people, there's like a year-long wait. So between when they started doing programming and when they were founded, when they were founded and when they get their 501c3, we would look at the founding date. Like whenever your programming started is really when your program started and you were LLC'd, incorporated into New York. That's sort of what we're looking at. We're going from there. We can, if there's a specific instance, we can look at it and work through that with you specifically. But that's sort of, it is a hard and fast rule. And, there's, like Susie said, there is, we are trying to be with organizations at a particular point in their life cycle.
Cool. A budget clarification question from Michael at FlexDance. FlexDance is a very small youth justice servicer in New York City. Clarification, 150K in 2024 or 2023? We're small but growing.
2024. And then I would also just lift up for folks that are on the smaller end. You can apply. I know 3 years seems like forever from now, but I actually, as a grantee, when we first applied, we didn't get it. I think we were just too small. And then I came back and we got it, and then we got it again. So then we were with SparkYouth for 6 years. So just if you're 150K in 2024, you can apply. But also just wanted to lift that up for folks that if you aren't selected this year, in 3 years from now, if you're still within the criteria, you can apply again for sure.
All right. If we are determined not eligible due to age, can we partner with a younger organization? And if so, who would be the grantee?
Sorry, say that again?
If we are determined not eligible due to age, can we partner with a younger organization? And who would be the grantee?
Oh, I see.
Mhm.
So if I'm interpreting this right, sort of, can you apply in partnership with another organization that's younger to like do programs together? Is that correct? Who's asking the question?
Samara Coles.
Yes, that's good morning. Yes, that is the question. Good morning, everyone. So yeah, to indulge a little bit more deeper into that question, I think we're on the cusp of the founding versus the 501c incorporation date. And so we may just be 1 year, if we're looking at the founder date, 1 year out of eligibility. But if we're looking at our 501c3 or incorporation date, we're we're right there, like 6 to 7 year mark. And so if we are deemed ineligible due to the founding date, will we be able to partner with another organization that fits that criteria to the max that we can connect and do our programming with? And then if so, who would be the grantee? Would it be the younger org or would it be us?
That's a great question. I'm also just flagging in our recording that we'll reach out to you separately to talk about whether or not you're eligible with the date on being on the cusp. We don't accept applications from, multiple orgs as one application. So it needs to be an individual organization. So let's say once we connect, we determine your organization is not eligible, and then another organization applies. They could apply, the younger organization, if they're selected, and part of what they want to use their funding for is building a partnership with your organization. Again, we wouldn't tell them how to spend that money, but we're just taking applications from single organizations that meet those requirements.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll reach out.
Thank you.
All right, great. From Steve, you mentioned a site visit. What if you don't have one designated site? We run our programs virtually and also have several site hubs at many different partner schools and nonprofits around New York City.
So one of the questions on the application, again, trying to streamline sort of communication later, is we actually ask, if you are selected for a site visit, please give us 3 ideal options. So you can name for us the place, the location, the date, the time. We definitely prefer to see live programs. The last time we did this process 3 years ago, it was all virtual site visits. And I was a participant as a board member at that time. Yeah, I mean, we all know it's just not the same. So if it's a purely virtual program, that's all you do, then that's what we should see. We really just want to see the heart of your work in action.
Great.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Olivia from Gallup NYC says that they're because of their founding date, they're not eligible, and their budget size, they're not eligible, but they want to know if there are other opportunities for partnership with SparkYouth for organizations like them, or if there may be in the future.
It's a great question that I don't have a clear answer to right now. We did our own strategic plan about 2 years ago. We're in our 3rd year, and one focus area for us was about how we could support grantees once they've graduated. So I think right now we're very focused on current grantees. The next area we know we'd like to grow is thinking about, once organizations have graduated and they become alumni organizations, how can we continue to provide some support for them? I would say like a next question for us, but again, we probably won't really address it until our next strategic plan, is what, if anything, could we offer organizations that aren't grantees? So, I mean, honestly, even you just bringing up the question, I appreciate, because I think it helps to tell us that there is the need for that. Right now, we're not currently offering anything beyond either current or former grantees.
All right. Really appreciate it. Sure. Susie, what is the financial support?
Oh, the amount. So as I mentioned, we fundraise every year, so it does depend on our fundraising success. We're doing our best, but it typically ranges between $50,000 and $80,000 a year. It's been $80,000 for the past 2 years. We give every grantee the same size grant. So whether if you're coming in, your budget's 150K, or you're coming in, your budget's 1.5 million, we give every organization the same size grant.
All right, from Megan at Octavia Project. Right now, our programming is predominantly summer only, but we're looking to expand to year-round programming, which a SparkYouth grant would enable. Does that make us ineligible currently?
Kelly's nodding her head yes. Kelly, can you answer this one?
Yeah, we don't, like the summer camp question, we don't just fund summer only programming. It has to be year-round programming. So we don't, that's not something we currently do. If summer programming is a part of your overall, we will fund your, the whole year thing. But if it's just a summer only, we do not fund just summer only programming.
Okay. All right. Susie, you've covered this a little bit, but just to clarify one more time from Maria at Embrace Her Legacy. It says they're based in New York City. However, since going virtual in 2020, we now run our programs nationally. With young women participating virtually from around the country, we do run in-person workshops in New York City as well, and scaling in the New York City space this year. Should our proposal focus only on our New York City work?
So great question. And I think a lot of organizations, I mean, one silver lining, I guess, of the pandemic is now being able to reach young people who aren't just in the same city as you. I would say similar to a question earlier, I think from Anna, I would, give us the full scope of your program in the sort of mission and history section. And if you want to talk a little bit about that when you're talking about your programs, but I would say focus as much as possible on the New York City piece. But you don't have to hide the other pieces, right? Knowing that you were elsewhere, we want to know that. That's good for us to know, but I would say primarily focus on the New York City piece.
All right, sorting through the chat, finding a couple more questions. Okay, we got another question asking, about opportunities for SparkYouth to support if they don't fit the requirements, but I think that one was pretty well covered, right?
I mean, again, I
don't have
just
anything else.
in our sort of, we believe in leading with listening, hearing this from people, I think, continues to open up the conversation for us, thinking about how particularly some of our cofactor lab offerings, like some of the professional development, are there opportunities going forward that we can open that up to a broader community of youth development organizations. We will definitely keep that in mind and think about that moving forward.
All right, should we list our incorporation date as our founding date on the application?
Yes.
Yes, great. Okay.
You don't have to have an independent 501c3. You can have.
I wrote that.
Yeah, I think Kelly.
Okay. I'm handling the ones that are just easy.
Okay,
yeah.
Great.
Okay, our organization has grown substantially in the last 18 months in terms of number of kids served, number of volunteers recruited, trained, number of depth of programming, staff, and board growth. We're at a key point now of digesting that recent growth and gearing up for our next strategic plan. My question, as SparkYouth overwhelmingly supports organizations that double or triple during the 3 years of funding, do we need to be certain that we are headed into significant near-term growth in order to be a successful applicant? Kelly did answer this, but I don't know if you want to add anything to it, Susie.
I would just add context that when we think of long-term success of SparkYouth, like what are we trying to do? We want amazing organizations to become even stronger, more resilient assets for their communities. So if for your organization, what allows you to get there is, like Kelly said, sort of shoring things up, codifying a model, building out your senior leadership team. I often think, and we talk a lot with our grantees, sometimes you're growing, and then you have to sort of have a building years where maybe your programs feel like they're plateauing. You're not adding more sites, you're not adding more young people, but you're really building up your strength internally before you can grow again. So you can define that for us.
Okay, this is a good question that I don't think we have a list, but maybe we can point people in the right direction, possibly. Following up on the question about supporting folks who do not qualify, can we provide a list of foundations who have similar criteria without the 2014 to 2022
Actually, literally
requirements?
was thinking about that this morning. We will see what we can add to our FAQs. Because I was thinking going into this call, I was like, oh, there's going to be people that don't qualify. Where else can we direct them to?
Yeah.
We'll think about that and try and add some recommendations on our FAQ page.
Great. Are you open to having conversations with organizational leaders? Sorry, I lost it. Ahead of submitting our applications.
Say that one more time.
Are you open to having conversations with organizational leaders ahead of submitting applications?
So we're not for I know this might seem counterintuitive, but we're really trying to make it as equitable a process as possible. So there's no way with our tiny team that we could have individual calls with every applicant. So it feels unfair to then say we will with the people who reach out or a handful of people. It's part of why we're doing this today too. We really wanted to give people space to hear from us and ask direct questions. So what I will say, I've noted for a few folks today, like if there's a very individual sort of question or clarification on whether you're eligible or what you should talk about in your application, send us an email, let us know what the specific question is. But we're just really trying to be as fair as possible to everyone. So didn't feel taking calls with some and not others was a fair way to do the process.
If we needed to follow up around one of the requirements, who would be best to reach out to?
Rachel? Send it
Sure.
to Rachel,
Say
since you
any
all
of us,
already
yeah.
have her email, and then we'll sort of get it to the right person on our team to get back to you.
Yep, that sounds good. And I can add my email to the chat in a second too, in case you don't have it on hand. Someone says, we applied for a Spark grant in the past and did not get funded. Would you have written notes or feedback that we can review? Maybe that's for Kelly.
Yeah, I'll email you. We don't share notes from our site visits, but I know why you weren't funded, so I will email you separately.
Great. Okay. Joshua at Fearless Flyers, we are a youth LGBTQIA+ cycling training program. We operate at 3 different spaces: an office rental, a nonprofit space, and a bike shop. How can we effectively plan and execute site visits for our nonprofit, considering that we operate out of multiple spaces? I know you talked about this a little bit already, Susie.
Yeah. Okay, I'm trying to get to it because I'm such a visual person. Okay, we operate at 3 different spaces: an office rental, a nonprofit space, and a bike shop. Oh, but then Joshua
he says, yeah, I just opened up the okay.
You'll tell us where to go to best see your work, and if we have to get on bikes, we'll do that. That'll be fun.
Yeah. Is there a common thread you found with the grantees you partnered with that grow 2 to 3 times versus the ones that don't? Is there any particular strategic objectives they set or achieve that have helped them grow?
Great question. I mean, I think it all starts with having excellent programming, right? If the work that you're doing is great, then you have to have that first and foremost, which is really what we're looking at, right? Like we're taking organizations in that already have something great that they're doing. And then I would say, honestly, which our investment, I think, often helps with, it's usually organizations that are able to invest in non-program staff. Once organizations finally get someone who's able to focus on development or focus on operations, or get the executive director enough out of the weeds of day-to-day operations that they can really think about the longer term growth and strategy for the organization, I think that's what allows organizations to really double and triple and jump to the next level. I do think a sort of additional positive that can come from being a SparkYouth grantee. I remember, again, having this experience myself as a grantee, is there's a little bit of a, seal of approval. Like there's a sense of, oh, they're getting funding from SparkYouth. That says something about the programs. And then I think grantees are often, able to kind of leverage that to open other doors to funding. I know we're at 11:01. I just wanted to say, I'm gonna stay on. We already planned. I will stay on for the next 15 minutes. So if folks, I'll keep going through the questions. We will also keep recording. So if you have to jump and one of your questions is in the chat, we will still address it. And then we'll make the recording available on our website. So you're welcome to stay. You're also welcome to leave. I know you have very busy schedules and lives. So just want to say sort of an official thank you again for all the work you're doing. Feel free to email Rachel, and we will stay on and continue to work through these questions.
Yeah, and you know what, Susie, we actually hit all the questions that are in the chat. So if anyone has a last minute question, this is your moment to throw it in.
And actually, I'll just say if we've covered the group questions, if any of the folks are still on who I said, email me, we'll follow up individually. If you want to stay on, we'll stop recording and we can just talk through your very specific individual questions. So then you already have the answer and we don't have to spend time emailing. All right, Rachel, I think we can stop recording and then we'll just hang on. Thank you all again. And anybody who's here and has a more individual question, you can throw it in the chat or come off mute.